The moon has always been a source of wonder, myth, and mystery. It lights up our nights, controls the tides, and marks the rhythms of time. But what if the moon isn't what it seems? What if this familiar, glowing orb in the sky is not a natural object at all, but a hollow, perhaps even artificial construct? That's the central idea behind the hollow moon theory. A concept that blends science fiction with ancient lore, and dares to question everything we think we know about Earth's closest celestial neighbor. Let's explore the bizarre clues and strange stories that fuel this unsettling possibility. During the Apollo missions in the late 1960s and early 1970s, NASA astronauts left behind scientific instruments, including seismometers. In 1969, the Apollo 12 crew intentionally crashed a portion of their spacecraft onto the lunar surface. The result shocked mission control. The moon reverberated for over 50 minutes. Scientists said it rang like a bell. This was not a one-time event. Later impacts during Apollo 13 and 14 produced similar results, long-lasting, deep seismic vibrations that were unlike anything observed on Earth. Some theorists argue that this behavior could be a sign that the moon is hollow or has vast inner cavities. After all, nothing on Earth behaves that way unless it's mostly empty inside. NASA's explanation is more conservative. The moon has a dry, rigid crust with little water content, which allows seismic waves to travel much farther than they would through Earth's moist, fractured interior. Still, the Bell effect remains one of the strangest lunar anomalies on record. In many ancient cultures, there are legends of a time when there was no moon. Aristotle mentioned that the Pelasgians, the ancient people of Arcadia, lived before there was a moon in the heavens. The Zulu people of Africa tell stories of two brothers, Wawane and Mpanku, who brought the moon to Earth, an artificial object, hollow and controlled, which changed the weather and caused great floods. Ancient Sumerian texts also hint at a celestial object that arrived unexpectedly in the sky. These accounts span multiple continents and civilizations, alluding to a world that once turned without a moon. Are these myths simply poetic metaphors? Or could they be distant memories of real events passed down in the only language available to ancient humans, myth and story? The moon is the fifth largest natural satellite in the solar system, and by far the largest relative to the size of its planet. No other moon comes close in size ratio. This alone makes Earth's moon an outlier, but there's more. The moon is precisely the right distance from Earth, about 384,000 kilometers, to perfectly cover the sun during a total solar eclipse. The sun is 400 times larger than the moon, and also about 400 times farther away. This perfect 400 to 400 ratio creates an extraordinary visual phenomenon that allows scientists to study the sun's corona during eclipses. Coincidence? Maybe. But to some researchers, it feels more like design. And then there's the moon's orbit. It's almost perfectly circular, and it's tidally locked, meaning we always see the same face. We never see the far side of the moon from Earth, unless we send spacecraft around it. Why does this object behave so precisely? Is it a natural product of gravitational forces? Or something else? In 1970, Soviet scientists Mikhail Vasin and Alexander Sherbakov published a radical paper titled, "Is the Moon the Creation of Alien Intelligence?" They suggested that the moon may be a colossal, ancient spaceship, an alien construct disguised as a natural satellite. According to their hypothesis, the moon might have a metallic outer shell with an inner structure that once supported machinery, life, or monitoring equipment. They compared it to a planet-sized arc that could travel between star systems. While their paper was largely dismissed in the West, it planted the seed for countless other theories. Could the moon be a derelict alien spacecraft? long abandoned, perhaps watching us still. More recent fringe thinkers have proposed even stranger ideas. Some argue that the moon might not just be a passive structure, but a kind of anchor for a simulated or controlled reality. In this vision, the moon is not just hollow, but alive with technology, possibly operating as a monitoring station, memory regulator, or even a civilization reset button. Ancient floods, magnetic pole shifts, and unexplained disasters. Some theorists claim these events correlate with specific lunar alignments or cycles. Others go further, suggesting that the moon is part of a larger system designed to keep human consciousness limited, trapped in cycles of forgetting and rediscovery. Is the moon helping to shape our very perception of time, reality, and evolution? It's impossible to prove, and perhaps that's the point. Even beyond the big theories, there are many small puzzles that don't quite fit. For example, when scientists first studied moon rocks, they expected to find thick layers of accumulated dust, possibly several meters deep. Instead, the moon's surface dust was surprisingly shallow. Where did all the debris go? Radio signals sent to the moon sometimes bounce back with strange delays, suggesting interior reflections that aren't typical for solid rock. And then there are the mysterious transient lunar phenomena. Sudden flashes, glows, or color changes on the moon's surface. These have been observed by astronomers for centuries, yet remain unexplained. Mainstream science sees the moon as the product of a massive collision in Earth's early history, a fragment of the young planet that cooled into orbit. But for every answer science provides, there seem to be more questions. Why does this object behave so perfectly? Why do myths around the world speak of its arrival? And why does its presence feel so scripted? Whether you believe in the hollow moon theory or not, one thing is certain: the moon is far more than just a rock in the sky. It is a mirror to our imagination, a beacon to our ancestors, and maybe, just maybe, a puzzle we were never meant to solve. Did you know that in 1958, two powerful rivals planned to take the lead in the space race by launching an atomic bomb at our natural satellite? What would have happened if they had gone through with it? Who the hell thinks bombing the moon is a good way to win a popularity contest? On top of that, we're going to find out if anyone ever did bomb outer space and why. Stick around, because what we're about to tell you sounds incredible, but it actually happened, and even Carl Sagan was involved. It's not like there weren't better ways to grab attention, but let's be honest, who wouldn't want to see some space fireworks? That was pretty much the thinking behind the US Air Force's secret project, A119. This top-secret initiative aimed to launch a nuclear bomb at the moon, hoping the explosion, with enough megatons, would be visible from Earth with the naked eye. To understand why such a wild idea could even seem reasonable at the time, we need to look at the context. In the 1950s and 60s, international tensions were sky high. The aftermath of World War II and the rise of two rival superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, led to the Cold War and the famous space race. That race brought incredible scientific advancements: artificial satellites, robotic landers on the moon, Venus, and Mars, the first human orbital flight, and eventually, the first moon landing in human history. But not every project launched during the space race was a win. Some were total failures, or worse, absurd and dangerous ideas that cost governments tons of money just to prove who had the bigger rocket, so to speak. Project A119 also aimed to answer some questions in planetary astronomy and astrobiology. Like what, you might ask? Well, for example, what would happen if a nuclear bomb exploded on the moon? A very original study, you have to give them that. Despite its age, it remains one of the few declassified reports on the topic. And to make this case even more interesting, young Carl Sagan was part of the team. He was responsible for predicting the effects of a nuclear explosion in vacuum and low gravity. This bold idea, to detonate an H-bomb on the moon for everyone on Earth to see, seems to have been sparked by a rumor published in the Pittsburgh Press in 1957. The article claimed the Soviet Union was planning to celebrate the anniversary of the October Revolution with a big bang on the moon. The explosion would take place at the moon's terminator, the boundary between its lit and dark sides. Apparently, Project A119 also considered the terminator as a target. The article also mentioned that if the Soviet missile missed, it would fall back to Earth and disintegrate in orbit. But what it didn't mention were the even bigger consequences if it did hit the lunar surface. But wait, what could possibly go wrong? The moon's super far away, right? Well, a lot could go wrong. It depends on the bomb's yield, of course, but what if a 100 megaton bomb exploded on the moon's surface? That would trigger a series of very unfortunate events. Since the moon has no atmosphere to dampen the blast, there would be no shockwave like on Earth. With nothing to contain or slow it down, the explosion would just keep expanding monstrously. Terrifying, right? But that's not all. The moon would experience a massive quake that could shake the entire body. Though, to be fair, back in 1958, there were no lunar bases to destroy, so that wasn't a big concern yet. The impact would pulverize the lunar surface, launching dust and debris into space in all directions, including Earth's path. Many of these micrometeorites could rain down on our planet, causing damage. While the blast on the moon wouldn't go on forever, it would eventually cool and lose energy. The leftover radioactive material would slowly settle back onto the surface. And without natural processes like Earth's rain or erosion to clean it up, the radiation would stay there for a very long time. So, what eventually happened to the US's Project A119 and the Soviet Union's Project E? Well, what had to happen? Both were scrapped due to the extreme risks and the possible impact on future lunar colonization. Now, a question some of you, especially Star Wars fans, might be wondering is, were there no more plans to blow stuff up in space after that? And the answer is, oh yes, there were. It wasn't exactly a bomb, but in 2009, NASA deliberately set off the equivalent of about 2 tons of TNT with the LCROSS, Lunar Crater Observation and Sensing Satellite. The goal was to see if there was frozen water in the Cabeus crater on the dark side of the moon. They crashed the probe into the moon, and the mission was a total success. Yes, there's water on the moon. Also, during the Cold War in 1962, the US launched Project Starfish, the largest nuclear detonation ever carried out in space. It was a high-altitude test that caused a massive electromagnetic pulse so strong that it messed up the very instruments meant to measure it. It even affected Hawaii, causing about 300 streetlights to go out, triggering burglar alarms and damaging phone lines. Now you know who and why someone wanted to nuke our dear satellite. But as it turns out, we couldn't change the moon's orbit or get a fireworks show that easily. The moon's too massive and the consequences are way too dangerous. But hey, it's all just a cold case now, right? There's no one still trying to prove who's bigger and stronger by nuking stuff. Right. Let us know in the comments if you already knew about this case, and until next time.
There are a few theories about how the moon appeared in the sky, and recently a new idea has popped up. But before we discuss this newcomer, let's look at the most popular hypotheses of the moon's formation. The capture theory claims that Earth's natural satellite used to be a wandering body, something like a large asteroid. It had formed somewhere else in the solar system before it was captured by our planet's gravity when passing nearby. The accretion hypothesis suggests that the moon formed in orbit around Earth at the same time as our planet appeared in the darkness of the cosmos. Then, there's the fission theory that says that at one point in its development, Earth was spinning so fast that some of its material broke away and started to orbit the planet. And the giant impact theory, which is the most popular these days, claims that the moon formed during a collision between Earth and another hypothetical planet called Theia, which was way smaller, probably the size of Mars. The resulting debris collected in an orbit around Earth and formed the moon. And now, let's move to the new theory you've been patiently waiting for. According to it, our satellite might have formed immediately, in a matter of hours, after the collision between Earth and Theia. The material from the two planets was likely launched directly into Earth's orbit right after the impact. It formed the moon and left traces deep inside Earth. In previous scenarios, Theia's remains were thought to have been scattered all over space, mixing with just a bit of the material coming from our own planet. But then, why do we see such shocking similarities between the moon's and Earth's compositions? Could it be that Theia was isotonically and chemically similar to Earth? Unlikely. But according to the new theory, more material from Earth was used to create the moon, its outer layers in particular. It might explain this similarity in composition. One more theory also tries to explain this mysterious similarity, the synestia model. According to it, our satellite formed inside a swirl of vaporized rock left by the collision. But this theory can't explain the moon's current orbit. The new single-stage theory does offer us plausible explanations for both the similarities in composition and the orbit of the moon. It might also provide us with some answers to previously unsolved mysteries. Since this scenario puts the moon into a wider orbit and gives it an interior that is not fully molten, it can explain the satellite's tilted orbit and thin crust. In any case, to confirm one of these theories, we need to analyze future lunar samples that will be brought to Earth by NASA's upcoming Artemis missions. Scientists will be able to get their hands on some material from deeper beneath the moon's surface and compare if real data matches these simulated scenarios. In the past, the Apollo missions already brought back about 1/3 of a ton of rock and soil from our satellite. These samples showed that Earth and the moon had some remarkable chemical similarities. They could only suggest one thing. These space objects had a linked history. If the moon had formed elsewhere and been captured by our planet's gravity later on, its composition would be very different from that of Earth. But if the moon had been created at the same time as Earth, or if it had broken off our planet, the type and proportion of minerals on the moon would be the same as on Earth. But they are a bit different. The moon's minerals contain less water than their terrestrial counterparts. The satellite is also richer in materials that form rapidly at high temperatures. That's why the most accepted model of the moon's formation these days is the giant impact model. Meteorites coming from the moon are a great source of data for studying the origins of our satellite too. They can tell us even more about the moon than Apollo samples, all because such meteorites come from all over the surface of the moon. Meanwhile, Apollo samples were collected just in one place near the equator, on the near side of the moon.
Under your feet, the moon is pulsing. You feel danger with every pore of your body. The lifeless satellite, or so you thought, stays still for a second before knocking you down to the ground with a powerful tremor. Is it a moonquake? For years, scientists believed the moon was completely inactive, but the newest evidence seems to suggest that this idea is totally wrong. Researchers from the University of Maryland have recently discovered 266 mysterious ridges on the far side of the moon. And these ridges likely point to recent geological activity. So, are we really talking moonquakes? Well, kind of. The ridges are located in volcanic regions that formed 3.2 to 3.6 billion years ago, but they appear much younger than expected. Typically found in clusters of 10 to 40, they're often located in areas where the moon's surface is structurally weaker. Now, when astronomers speak about recent, don't take their words literally. They don't mean last year or even decade. Most models scientists created suggested that the moon's geological activity ended 2.5 to 3 billion years ago. But the new information hints at the possibility that these formations have been active within the last billion years. Some of the smaller ridges seem to have formed as recently as 200 million years ago, and that is considered relatively young on the moon's timescale. It means that the moon may still be experiencing geological changes today. These discoveries kinda challenge our understanding of the moon's history and evolution. But how did scientists come to these conclusions anyway? Researchers from the University of Maryland and the Smithsonian Institution used crater counting to estimate the age of lunar ridges. It works like this. Surfaces with fewer craters are younger, and the more craters some region has, the older it is. Plus, the analysis showed that some ridges cut through already existing craters, meaning they likely formed around 160 million years ago. In geological terms, this is very recent, suggesting that these ridge-forming processes may still be happening. Another cool thing is that the ridges on both the near and far sides of the moon are similar, which means they may have formed through the same geological processes, having been shaped by the same forces. These forces might include the moon's gradual shrinking, thermal contraction, and shifts in its orbit. We'll talk about it a bit later. Another argument supporting the idea of a still active moon is decades-old data from the Apollo missions. They had already detected shallow moonquakes with the Apollo lunar seismic experiment, recording 28 quakes ranging from magnitude 1.5 to 5. Researchers believe that these ridges may be linked to similar seismic activity. Now, about that bizarre shrinking of our natural satellite. Scientists believe the moon formed about 4.5 billion years ago when a Mars-sized object collided with early Earth. This catastrophic impact likely sent bunches of superheated material into space. Eventually, they came together and formed the moon. In its early years, the moon was just a molten world, shaking from intense volcanic and seismic activity. So, the moon used to be a molten mess floating through space. But when did it actually solidify? Scientists have finally figured it out, 4.43 billion years ago. This was a huge turning point, not just for the moon, but for Earth too. After all, the giant impact that formed the moon might have also been the final blow that made Earth stable enough to support life. In any case, billions of years passed. The moon gradually cooled and contracted. And now look at this modern-day rocky sphere illuminating our nights. But the moon isn't completely rigid yet. It still keeps cooling. And this slow cooling of its core might be one possible reason for the moon's continued activity. As it cools, the moon's interior contracts, which leads to cracks and shifts in the crust. One of the clearest signs of this contraction is found in the lunar maria. See these large, dark patches on the moon? Those are called maria, areas formed when lava filled ancient asteroid impact craters and then solidified. Then, over time, the cooling and contracting crust created these wrinkle ridges. Another factor of the ongoing geological activity could be the moon's gravitational interactions with Earth. Such non-stop powerful interactions likely create surface stress and trigger tectonic movements. It's all good and exciting, but can this activity on the moon actually affect humans? In a sense, it can. The moon has long been seen as a stable place for future bases and resource extraction. But the discovery of this ongoing geological activity is pretty worrying. If the surface is still shifting, future settlements, infrastructure, and mining operations could face serious risks. That's why, at the moment, we need seismometers and ground-penetrating radars to better understand these movements. It will allow us to assess potential dangers before any long-term missions begin. By the way, there's another potential problem future lunar missions might have to deal with, and it's moon dust, aka regolith. Apollo astronauts quickly learned that this jagged, sticky dust gets everywhere and can damage suits, equipment, and even health. A new study from Texas A&M engineers found another problem. When rockets land or take off, they kick up regolith, which can become a collision hazard, especially with many spacecraft bringing crews and cargo to the moon. Lunar regolith comes in all sizes, from tiny dust particles to large rocks. The main ingredient in moon dust is fine silicate materials, about 70 microns in size, like a human hair. They formed over billions of years as meteors and asteroids smashed into the moon's surface, grinding much of it into powder. Unlike Earth, the moon has almost no atmosphere. It's incredibly thin, so there's no wind or water to smooth out the dust. On top of that, constant exposure to solar wind has given the regolith an electrostatic charge, making it stick to anything it touches. Apollo astronauts quickly found this out the hard way. Moon dust clung to their suits, got trapped inside their landers, and stuck to everything. Worse, it became a health hazard, causing eye irritation and breathing problems inside their spacecraft. But at the moment, it seems like a problem for future us. A much more important issue is finding water to support future missions, and China is going to deal with it. It's getting ready for a big mission to look for hidden ice on the moon. As part of the Chang'e 7 mission in 2026, a flying robot will explore deep craters at the moon's south pole, where ice might be trapped. If they manage to confirm it, this could be a game changer for future lunar missions. Astronauts will have a water source and even fuel for space travel. The mission is a key step in China's plan to land astronauts on the moon within 5 years. While signs of water have been found before, like in soil samples from Chang'e 5's probe and observations by NASA and Indian spacecraft, scientists believe that deep ice deposits are the real key to supporting future missions. The south pole of the moon has some incredibly deep craters, and experts think ice could be hiding inside them. The flying robot will try to explore one or more of these craters after landing. If it does find the ice, it could make long-term moon missions much cheaper and more practical, helping astronauts live and work on the moon. Some scientists also think that this discovery could offer us some clues about extraterrestrial life. In any case, whether we find water on the moon and learn to deal with that pesky dust or not, the recent discovery of those young lunar ridges is a game changer. If the moon is still geologically active, it means we don't know as much about our closest neighbor as we thought. What else could the moon be hiding? Are we really prepared for the idea that this lifeless satellite might actually be more dynamic than we imagined? Future missions, which might not be as safe as we once believed, will probably show.
There's something happening inside the moon, something that nobody expected. Not a dramatic shift you'd see on the outside, but deep down, where things seem frozen in time, scientists have uncovered a hidden layer of what you could only call moon goo. Remember those school lessons about the crust, mantle, and core? Much like the Earth, the moon is made up of layers, a crust, mantle, and core. However, the moon's core is much smaller compared to ours. Earth's core is huge. It makes up about a third of our entire planet's mass. The moon's core makes up only about 1 to 2% of its mass, and its diameter is about 1/5 the diameter of the moon itself. It's surrounded by a hard, rocky mantle, but it turns out that between these two layers, that mysterious goo layer, and it's way more important than you might think. The layer is soft and partially molten, ebbing and flowing like the tides in our oceans. It rises and falls, stretching and shifting as if it were alive. Its movement isn't chaotic, but subtle and regular. We always knew that the moon influences our seas and oceans, causing tides with its gravity. But it turns out that we influence it back. The goo ocean reacts to the gravitational dance between Earth and the Sun. Also, the molten layer could be made of ilmenite, a very intriguing material. Ilmenite is rich in titanium, a strong and lightweight metal that we really love over here on Earth. Titanium is used in everything from airplane parts and spacecraft to medical devices, even in everyday items like bikes and laptops, all because it's incredibly strong and very resistant to corrosion and heat. So, if the moon might have a molten layer rich in ilmenite, that would be awesome. Astronomers are already planning for lunar bases, and if we had a material to build structures, spacecraft, or even tools for astronauts right there, that would be a game changer. Otherwise, we'd need to transport materials from Earth, which is extremely costly. This is our first tangible sign that the moon is not just a cold, boring rock. Instead, it's dynamic, living, and breathing, with moving forces beneath the surface. NASA used new special tools to discover this: the Gravity Recovery and Interior Laboratory and the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter. These are both space missions designed to study the moon, but they don't just look at the surface like a telescope. Instead, they help measure things we can't see with our eyes, like the moon's gravity and how it changes over time. Grail sent 2 small spacecraft around the moon named Ebb and Flow. Clever. The idea was for these spacecraft to fly close to each other and measure tiny differences in the moon's gravity as they go. It's like they were feeling the moon's invisible pull in different places. If the moon's gravity was stronger in one spot, the spacecraft moved closer together, and if it was weaker, they moved farther apart. This helps scientists understand what's going on inside the moon, even if they can't actually go there. And the spacecraft intentionally crashed into the moon in December 2012 to end the mission. The Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter is a bit different. It takes super detailed pictures of the moon and collects other important information about its surface. By combining the information from both Grail and LRO, we were able to find this goo layer. But this discovery actually challenges everything we thought we knew about lunar geology. How did this molten layer get there? How long has it existed? And perhaps more fascinating, how it stayed warm for millions of years. That's some million-dollar questions. The moon's core generates heat just like ours. But it's not as easy as saying, oh, the core's heat probably keeps it warm and molten. Well, first, the moon's core is much smaller and less active than Earth's, meaning it produces significantly less heat. Plus, the moon is much cooler than Earth in general. With temperature dropping to minus 200 degrees Fahrenheit on the surface, how could this inner layer still stay in this flowing state? That's still a mystery. In any case, this goo could actually explain a lot of stuff about the moon. For example, astronomers were exploring moonquakes and how they happen. Now they think that it might be this semi-molten layer shifting and moving beneath the surface. Now, beyond the moon itself, it also tells us more about other celestial bodies. If the moon, something we considered basically a huge static rock, has such a dramatic life, what about other planets, moons, or asteroids? Could they also hide similar hidden movements beneath their surfaces? We can even understand our own planet better, learn more about how tides and similar stuff works. There are so many great discoveries we've been making on the moon. Recently, we found some awesome stuff beneath the surface, massive caves hidden for millions of years. For over 50 years, scientists have suspected that the moon's surface is full of underground tunnels and caves. These are known as lava tubes because they were formed by lava. Duh! Millions of years ago, the moon was pretty unstable. It underwent some volcanic activity, causing eruptions. When a volcano erupts, lava can flow across the surface. As the outer layer of the lava cools and hardens, it forms a solid roof of dark material. It's actually what these famous dark spots on the moon are. These are dark, hardened remains of ancient lava. But the hot, molten lava continues to flow through the center. Once the eruption ends and the lava drains away, what's left behind is an empty hollow tunnel, hence a lava tube. On Earth, we have lava tubes in places like Hawaii or Iceland, where volcanic activity has created similar underground tunnels. The same thing happened on the moon billions of years ago, although they're much crazier compared to ours. In fact, Lunar lava tubes are now thought to be some of the largest and longest in the entire solar system. One such cave was discovered beneath the famous Mare Tranquillitatis, the place where Apollo 11 first landed, and it's at least 340 feet deep. Now, all these lava systems have remained hidden just beneath the surface, untouched for millions of years. Only now, they finally managed to prove their existence. Scientists from the University of Trento in Italy found them using special radar technology and advanced computer methods. These techniques let you see underground by sending radar waves. The waves bounce back and give clues about what's hidden underneath. By analyzing the way these waves reflected back, the researchers could detect the shape and size of the hidden caves. Now, the best thing about this discovery is that we could build all our bases there. These caves protect from radiation, harsh winds, and meteoroids. NASA even found evidence that some of these caves stay at a steady 63 degrees Fahrenheit. That's some crazy coziness for the moon. And on top of that, there could even be some water there. So humans could take shelter inside these natural tunnels and build entire colonies on the moon. And I know what you're thinking. Could unexpected lunar monsters hide deep in those caves? Well, sure. There's a huge potential for exploring these caves and finding some awesome stuff. But even if we manage to find a miracle, like small life or microbial organisms, there's a 99% chance that there won't be actual animals or monsters. It would just be impossible for them to develop in such conditions. But it would make a great horror movie. Researchers want to send robots or drones to explore the tunnels first, and then see if they're safe enough for humans. And it's not just the US getting in on the action. China is also investigating the possibility of using these moon caves as a future base, showing that the race to explore and settle the moon is heating up. Wow, the NASA hotline is ringing off the hook. The call center operator is all sweaty from stress. They barely have time to answer the phone, and all the messages they get say the same thing. There's something glowing on the moon. Indeed, hundreds and thousands of amateur astronomers were watching the moon that night. And suddenly, there was a bright light on it, as if someone had lit a powerful spotlight on the surface. Scientists immediately began to look for an explanation to this phenomenon. They first thought it was simply the glow of an airplane flying between the observers and the moon. But then it wouldn't have been seen by so many people from different parts of the world at the same time. The next suspects were the Starlink satellites. Theoretically, one of them could have played a cruel trick on amateur astronomers. They could have mistaken the small satellite's light for a flash of light on the moon. But then again, if the satellite were the culprit of this mess, the flare wouldn't be static, but moving. While some scientists continue to search for an answer to this mystery, others decide to investigate the phenomenon in more detail. For this purpose, they have built a new telescope north of Seville, Spain. The conditions there are quite suitable for observing the moon. The telescope has 2 cameras, controlled remotely from the campus in Germany. If both cameras pick up any unusual phenomenon on the surface of the moon, it will quickly zoom the telescope there to see what's going on. It'll also require advanced artificial intelligence to teach the cameras to distinguish between the unexplained phenomenon on the moon and the light of an airplane, a satellite, or a small meteorite that just entered the Earth's atmosphere. While the telescope is doing its investigation, we already have a theory that may explain the appearance of such bright round flashes on the moon's surface. So, the moon influences the tides of the seas and oceans on Earth with its gravitational force. But the Earth can affect the moon in the same way. Only the force will be 32.5 times stronger. While the moon orbits the Earth, at one point it may be as close to our planet as possible. Then the force of the interaction will be greatest. At this point, tidal forces may force cracks in the surface of the moon to open and release gas from its interior. A powerful jet of gas will lift the lunar dust with it, and what we see as a bright flash through our telescopes is really just a fog of dust, which is round and reflects sunlight well. If you look at it from a distance, it really does look like a flash. As the dust rises, we think there's been a small explosion, and that flash gradually fades as the dust settles down. These things happen all the time on the Moon's surface. They're called transient lunar phenomena, and besides lunar flashes, much more mystical and bizarre things have happened. Back in 1178, 5 monks claimed to have seen the Moon, being in the shape of a horn, begin to split in two from an upper point. Then fire and sparks began to blaze from the place of separation. It was as if a dragon were spewing flames. In the next moment, the Moon began to pulsate and then returned to its calm state. This phenomenon was repeated more than 10 times, and the flames took different shapes each time. When this nightmare was over, the Moon turned black. It wasn't until the 20th century that scientists tried to explain the phenomenon. They theorized that a large asteroid collided with the Moon at the time, and it was this asteroid that should be blamed for creating the Giordano Bruno crater, 15 Brooklyn bridges wide. But in that case, millions of tons of fragments from the asteroid would have hit the Earth as well, and then people would have seen an incredible meteor shower. It would have been very bright, and the memories of it would definitely have been in the archives. But that didn't happen. Now the phenomenon the monks observed seems questionable. Perhaps they did see an asteroid fall, only it was falling on the Earth itself, and they perceived the light from the burning meteorite as something sinister happening on the Moon. Or maybe the monks were simply imagining things. There's no witnesses to this event other than them. Another unusual phenomenon is the blue and red lights on the Moon. They can be seen when it's horn-shaped, and this occurs most often in the Aristarchus crater. The flashes come and go very quickly, almost like lightning. In fact, this is electricity. Tidal forces are to blame for this too. They cause mechanical stress to build up in the rocks. This can produce an electric field, which creates the blue flashes that have surprised many amateur astronomers. There can also be starbursts on the Moon. We can blame this on meteorites that fall on the surface. Because the Moon has no atmosphere, asteroids that approach it don't burn up. Having a lot of weight and speed, they cause an explosion on impact. And here on Earth, we see it as a starburst. For example, on May 13, 1972, there was a meteorite impact of 1,000 tons of TNT near where Apollo 14 landed. If we lived much earlier, we might have witnessed constant bright flashes on the Moon's surface. All the craters there are formed by such meteor strikes. So imagine the fireworks that were there years ago. And a lot of those meteorites were even useful too. They brought water with them. Yes, there is water on the Moon. NASA confirmed this fact after studies with the SOFIA telescope. It was mounted on an airplane. The observations were made from the upper atmosphere of the Earth. At such an altitude, the dry air allowed the telescope to see even the smallest details. Water might have been in the craters at the poles of the Moon. These places have never seen light, and the water there might be encased in ice. But SOFIA found water on the sunlit surface of the Moon. Of course, it's only H2O molecules that are present in the dust layers, but that's something. If we manage to collect all this water, we'll get very little of it. In comparison, the Sahara Desert has about 100 times more water than we found on the Moon. But an even more unusual phenomenon is happening there right now. The Moon is actually rusting, just like a piece of old metal. For rust to appear, we need iron, water, and oxygen. Lunar soil has enough iron in it, and as we've already learned, there's some water too. The last piece of the puzzle is oxygen. Everyone knows there's no atmosphere on the Moon, and we can't breathe there, but oxygen is still present. The solar wind brought it there. The wind from our warm star moves at an extremely high speed. It scrapes oxygen from the upper parts of our atmosphere and carries it further through space. Eventually, the wind with the oxygen molecules reaches the Moon. Voila! All the ingredients for corrosion are in place, and the iron ore on the surface of the Moon begins to take on a reddish hue. If this process goes on long enough, in the distant future, the Moon will look like Mars, it will turn orange-red. Yes, the signature color of Mars came exactly from that corrosion that began there thousands and thousands of years ago, when there were rivers and seas with water and an atmosphere with oxygen. Other strange objects that can be seen on the Moon were left there by humans. Between 1969 and 1972, 12 people visited there as part of the Apollo program. In all, there were 6 landing sites where the astronauts left a bunch of stuff behind. Besides a couple of dozen satellites and spacecraft that fell or landed softly on the Moon, there's a lunar rover, some United States flags, a family photo of one of the astronauts, and even 3 golf balls. And the first 2 people to be on the Moon left behind a whole pile of stuff. When they were about to go home, they took a lot of soil samples and rocks with them. And to carry it all away, they had to get rid of everything unnecessary on board the lunar module. The TV camera, the sample collection tools, the science equipment, and even the armrests from the seats. The astronauts stood outside the lunar module for a full 8 minutes and threw out a whole mountain of unnecessary items. If you collect all these objects and debris that we left there by 12 astronauts and put them on the scales, it will show about 199 tons. It's like 3 heavy armored tanks or 3 large passenger planes. Strange, but true. Now imagine something so powerful that it could rip the atoms of your body apart in a fraction of a second. Ow! This something is soundlessly dashing through space, not extinct, not alive, stuck in between. If this terrifying monster were moving towards Earth, we'd be doomed. So, is it? Astronomers have found a fast and powerful space object zooming through our home Milky Way galaxy at over 110,000 miles per hour. That's faster than any rocket we've ever made. This bizarre space object got its name of a zombie star, all because it's the leftover part of a star that passed away a long time ago, but is still moving. This zombie star is a kind of an object called a magnetar, a super small, super heavy ball about the size of a city but heavier than the Sun. That makes it one of the densest objects in space. Only black holes are denser. Hey, let's not forget about me, huh? Magnetars also have an incredibly strong magnetic field. The one our zombie guy has is 100 trillion times stronger than Earth's. That's so strong that if the magnetar came close to Earth, it could wipe out every credit card on the planet just from its magnetism, and we couldn't shop anymore. Plus, if a person got too close to a magnetar, like 600 miles or so, it could pull their very atoms apart, and they couldn't shop anymore. Luckily, this magnetar is very far away and not coming near us. When it was first discovered, it was about 15,000 light-years away from Earth. That's a huge distance, so you don't get to worry about your atoms being disconnected yet. Astronomers first spotted the zombie magnetar in 2008. And since only about 30 magnetars are known in our galaxy, it was a lucky and rare find. Scientists use space telescopes like Hubble and Gaia to watch it over time. That's how they discovered it was moving much faster than they thought. Now, astronomers are trying to figure out how this zombie star got such a big kick. At first, they thought that, like most magnetars, this one was born when a giant star exploded in a supernova and the leftover core became a super-dense neutron star. According to their theory, it could have happened near something called supernova remnant HB9. That would make sense since most magnetars are created this way. But when they tracked its movement, they found that the zombie star was moving too fast and going in the wrong direction to have come from HB9. They traced its path thousands of years into the past and still couldn't find any exploding star or star cluster it could have come from. This means scientists now have one more mystery on their hands. Where did the zombie star come from, and how was it made? One explanation is that it came from a white dwarf, which is the leftover core of a smaller star like our Sun after it runs out of fuel. Now normally, when white dwarfs explode, they're destroyed completely. But in rare situations, instead of blowing apart, a white dwarf might collapse into itself and turn into a neutron star. This neutron star could then become a magnetar. This unusual way of forming a magnetar also gives clues about another mystery: fast radio bursts, or FRBs. These are very quick and powerful flashes of radio energy from deep space. Some FRBs come from galaxies that are so old there shouldn't be any exploding stars left. But if magnetars can be born from collapsing white dwarfs, that might explain how those FRBs are still happening. In any case, learning how magnetars form could help us explain many strange and powerful events we see across the universe. But so far, the investigation is still on, and no answers have been found yet. Zombie stars wandering across the universe isn't the only mystery we haven't solved yet. At one point, you might come across one of them while traveling through the cosmos. It looks like nothing. At a distance of 700 million light-years away from Earth, there's a hole, a blank void that has very few galaxies. This is a roughly spherical region about 330 million light-years across. Our home Milky Way galaxy could fit there thousands of times over. It's the mysterious Bode's void in the constellation of Bodes. Yeah, makes sense. You see, galaxies look like a giant web. Most of them are parts of long structures called filaments. Those wind through the cosmos, and when they meet, they form regions with a high concentration of galaxies. These regions are what we know as galaxy clusters. But between these clusters and threads, there are huge, empty voids that hardly contain any galaxies. Such voids make up almost 80% of the observable universe, and most of them are huge, from 30 to 300 million light-years wide. The Bode's void is one of the most massive ones. It has even earned the title of supervoid. Astronomers think it might be the result of a few smaller voids merging. But what could have caused such giant empty areas to appear in the first place? The reason might lie in the origin of the universe. In its early days, I wasn't around then, all the matter in the universe was packed together quite tightly. Astronomers even thought it was something like a uniform soup. But soon, random quantum fluctuations started disturbing this matter. Some areas became denser, and their gravitational pull became stronger. They began stealing matter from less dense regions. This made such areas even denser, and they kept attracting more and more matter. At the same time, smaller clumps of matter started drifting further away from the center, forming galaxies. If you visited a star cluster called Palomar 5, you'd forget all about voids and supervoids and even zombie stars. Instead, you'd need to concentrate on surviving, since the region is hiding a swarm of over 100 black holes right in the middle. And those black holes aren't just sitting there, they're at work, shaping the cluster nonstop. Palomar 5 is a group of stars located about 80,000 light-years away from us. Normally, clusters like this are dense and tightly packed, with stars all bunched up together. But Palomar 5 is different. It's spread out and has a huge tail of stars, stretching across 30,000 light-years. This beautiful tail is called a tidal stream. It's like the stars are spilling out of the cluster, creating a long river of light. Tidal streams like this are rare and hard to study. Globular clusters like this one are super old. Some are almost as old as the universe itself. But Palomar 5 also stands out because it's the only cluster we know about that still has a tidal stream attached to it. And the black holes inside the cluster might be to blame. They're pulling on the stars in the cluster, messing with their orbits, and slingshotting them right out of the cluster. Or would that be slingshooting? I don't know. Anyway, these stars are what make up the tidal stream. Over time, more and more stars get flung out. Palomar 5 has way more black holes than expected. About 20% of the cluster's mass is made up of black holes, over 100 of them, each about 20 times the mass of our Sun. Of course, Palomar 5 isn't going to last forever. In about 1 billion years, the cluster will completely fall apart. By then, all the stars will have been gone, leaving behind just the black holes. And these black holes will orbit the Milky Way, like a ghostly remnant of a cluster that used to be there. Even though this cluster is creepy enough, there's something even more eerie you can see in space: thick clouds of gas and dust called nebulae. One of the most unusual ones is probably NGC 2392, located 5,000 light-years away from Earth in the constellation of Gemini. It was discovered more than 200 years ago, and became popular because of its unusual appearance. It's basically a disk of material with a ring of comet-shaped objects. The tails of these objects stream away from the star at the center of the nebula. The bizarre orange streaks in the outer part of the cloud stretch light years away in all directions. The middle resembles a ball of twine, but in reality, it's a bubble of material blown into space by the wind of high-speed material produced by the central star. Wow.